right, well, I think that's enough of that. Let's get on with the presentation, the whole reason you guys came here tonight. So wood ducks, of course. How many of you have seen wood ducks? So anybody hasn't seen one? Ever seen wood duck? Wood ducks are spectacular. I clearly remember as a kid that they were quite rare. Finding wood duck was a big deal back when I was a kid. And I didn't really know it then, but they were almost wiped out in the early 1900s. And so they're one of the big conservation successes of the 20th century is getting their population built back up. But now they're facing new threats and some new problems. And here to tell us all about that is a local prodigy. How many people in here already knew our presenter tonight?
Thank you.
So I don't need to tell you anything about her. You all know her better than I do, I'm sure. But we are super proud to have Tenaya Russell come and join us tonight and tell us all about her research and work with wood ducks in the Central Valley. Tenaya?
Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you. So let's see. Can you all hear me okay? I'm not used to using a mic. Okay. Well, thank you all so much for coming. I'm so honored to be here. As Tim said, I grew up on the coast and many of you were my mentors growing up. And so it's just super special to come back and be able to talk to you all about what I'm doing now. So I'm going to talk about wood ducks and sort of in the context of the past, the present, and the future of waterfowl conservation. So, little outline for the talk. I'll be talking about myself a little bit, and then some wood duck natural history, which many of you probably already know, but I want to show you cute pictures of ducklings, so here we are. Talk a bit about wood duck conservation over the last century, some of the stuff that Tim alluded to. And then move on to the UC Davis Wood Duck Project, which I've been involved in for the past 3 years, my own master's research, and then just share a few thoughts on the future of waterfowl conservation. So you might be wondering how I got into ducks. And I've always known, what a difference 20 years makes. No, I'm just kidding. I had no idea I wanted to work with ducks. But I did spend a lot of time outdoors as a kid. I was an avid birder. I was really interested in wildlife photography. I did a whole bunch of animal husbandry stuff with a bunch of crazy species. I interned with Noyo Center, and I also worked at Village Veterinary for a little while and thought I was going to be a veterinarian going into college at UC Davis. But all roads led me back to wildlife. So yeah, that's how I got to where I am today. And I want to thank up front my master's advisor, Dr. John Eady, and the UC Davis Wood Duck Project. I would not be here without them. So my research interests are broad, and I could expand this quite a bit. But for the purposes of this talk, I'm really interested in novel stressors and how wildlife respond to them and whether they're able to adapt and how they do that. I'm interested in this thing called reconciliation ecology, which is the idea that we really can't go back necessarily to what a habitat used to look like, but we might be able to create areas for wildlife to persist even in human-dominated landscapes. And then I also think that collaboration with stakeholders is super important, especially people outside of academia. I love academia and everything it's taught me, but we can be a little bit insular in the collegiate world. And so, I think working with not just federal and state agencies, but also nonprofits and private landowners and other people who are really passionate about conservation really gets us farther in the long run. And waterfowl conservation is really incorporates all of these things. So it was perfect that I found myself here. All right, so some information about wood ducks. If you don't know, they are called wood ducks because they perch in trees, unlike a lot of other species. They really like these freshwater wooded habitats, riparian areas, think the Mendo woodlands. They mainly eat seeds and invertebrates, and they also eat a lot of acorns, which is kind of cool. They nest in cavities, and in trees, or they will readily nest in boxes that we make for them, which is super useful for those of us who study them because it means I can go out and find where they're nesting. They're serially monogamous, which means they pair up within a season, but then they might switch pairs between seasons. And they have precocial young. So I'm going to talk more about that right now. Okay, so just for contrast, this is the progression of a black phoebe. They are altricial, as are all songbirds. They are eggs that are incubated for about 14 days. They hatch completely helpless, blind, very few feathers, and completely get taken care of by their parents. After about 2 weeks of being constantly fed by their parents, they grow up and they fledge and they leave the nest. Precocial birds, on the other hand, waterfowl and others like shorebirds, are a little bit different. So they incubate their eggs for 30 days. This is the inside of a wood duck nest box. Before I continue, I should also say, my mom reminded me of this, that all of these photos are photos that I have taken on the UC Davis Wood Duck Project, and you might see some photos of us holding birds. That's all done with appropriate federal permits. These are wild birds, not pets. Okay, so eggs are incubated, and hens take this very seriously. They like make an entire little down blanket out of the feathers on their chest, and then they just tuck themselves in. And you can see there on the right, that hen is just fine. She's doing great, but her entire head is underneath her own down. And pretty much every time we'd check this box, we'd be like, are you alive? Yeah, okay, cool. She was the headless duck for a season. Okay, so the eggs develop, and I wanted to share this with you because I think it's a really cool part of the project. So we candle the eggs in the field to see where they're at in development so we can predict when they will hatch. And that kind of lighter area in the egg you see there in the middle is the air sac. And then on the right, that shadow on the upper part is actually the duckling's bill. So that egg is probably going to hatch in the next day, and it's about to tap out through the eggshell. So after being incubated, they hatch, and I have a little video here for you all. Oops, there's no sound. Okay, well, there was sound. I don't know why there's no sound. Oh, maybe if I turn this on. Nope, there's still no sound. Okay. All right, well, if there was sound, you'd be able to hear the duckling peeping. Not sure why it's not working right now. And then right at the end, it gives a big yawn because hatching is super exhausting.
Is the volume down on the sound?
I had it hooked up to the speaker. The mic is, oh, okay. Is that what it is? It was working before when I
Yeah.
started
Okay.
it.
Do you want light over there for a second?
Maybe.
No.
Did
So
it
your
get
sound's
unhooked?
We had the sound.
No,
I
it's,
got the lights on.
I thought maybe it's not the mic, right? Like it, before it was letting me operate the sound, but now it's like grayed out over here. I don't know. It's okay.
It didn't
Whoops.
go off.
So sorry, everyone.
So the volume's up there.
Oh yeah, now it's up. All right. Well. Oh, there we go. All right. Just had to unplug it and replug it. So they're very vocal as they're hatching usually, because they actually, so all the ducklings within the nest coordinate when they hatch, which is pretty amazing. So one will start pipping out and peeping, and then they'll all start hatching and doing it. And that's so that they can all jump together, which I'll show you in a moment. And straight to sleep. Yeah, so whoops. So at hatch, nestlings look like a little bit of a mess, but they are able to see and move around and feed themselves. They're fully covered in down, so big contrast from those altricial songbirds we saw a bit ago. But hatching is exhausting. So they have to sleep for about 12 to 24 hours before they go anywhere. The photo on the left is a duckling that I've just measured, and I set it down for like a couple seconds in an equipment, kind of like a foam pad, and it immediately was out, immediately took a nap. And then on the photo of the right, you can see all the ducklings sleeping with their mom. And then after 12 hours, they wake up in the morning completely fluffy and ready to go. It's incredible. The transition is just amazing. You open a box in the morning and they're like jumping up and down. They're literally climbing the walls. They've got these little sharp claws on their feet so they can like climb up the inside of the box to get to the opening. And then they jump, which is pretty cool. So we have another video.
How high is that box?
So our boxes are only about, well, this one's only about 6 feet off the ground, but in natural cavities, they can fall like, I want to say like 40 to 60 feet and be fine, which is incredible. Yeah, so can you guys hear me without the mic okay? Okay, it's just, sorry. All right. Yeah, so basically, they usually hatch in the afternoon. They wake up in the morning, and then they kind of, like I said, they do this prep stage where they're like jumping around in the box, and their mom actually leaves, and she goes out and she kind of checks out the area, makes sure it's really safe, and then she comes back, and she calls them from underneath the box, so they won't leave without her. So this is the mom of these ducklings on the right-hand photo there, and she's sitting in the grass under the box calling them. And in this video, sort of towards the end, you can hear her cooing. Hold on. Right there, that little like repeated coo. That's her calling. That's her. Yeah. And it's really fun to watch because not only is the mom there cooing and calling them, but they're all peeping so loudly because once the first one jumps, they all have to follow each other. So they're like all yelling. Everybody's like, we're going, we're going, we're going. It's great. And then they all follow their mom off towards the nearest water. At our boxes, that's usually pretty close by. In other situations, they can walk over a mile to find water, which is pretty incredible. And they never come back to the nest. So, yeah.
Does she know
Whoops.
how many have come out of that hole?
You know, they seem to. It's really interesting because very occasionally we'll have ducklings left behind, which is really sad. But they're often ones that either hatch a little late or just aren't quite there for whatever reason. Physically, they can't climb up. But normally she'll wait until they've all jumped and then they'll all leave together, which is pretty incredible. And they're also some hens will let their ducklings jump with you sitting right there watching. Amazing. Some of them, they'll pop up into the opening of the box and look around and they'll see you and they'll just sit there. And I've sat watching a hen for over 2 hours and she's like, nope, we're not leaving until you leave. And then you're like, okay, I guess I will leave. Yeah. So they're very, very judicious with when they go. Okay, so wood ducks are widely distributed throughout the United States. On the eastern part of the United States, their range is pretty large for breeding. They nest through the flooded swamp forests of the southeast, up through the Mississippi alluvial valley, up into Illinois and Indiana. But on the west coast, you can see it's much more restricted. That purple area, kind of California, Washington, Oregon a little bit, maybe Idaho and Montana a bit. But California is a really key area for our Pacific population. And they're also culturally significant. They are a favorite of birders and photographers. I have no statistics to back that up, but I think we can all agree. They're also the second most commonly hunted duck species behind mallards. And they've been documented by humans for thousands of years. They show up in Native American oral history and on artifacts and so on. And it's a little bit hard to find evidence specifically for wood ducks, but we know that indigenous people throughout North America hunted waterfowl for subsistence long before Europeans ever came here. So this is a decoy that was found in a cave in Nevada, and it's over 2,000 years old. Can anyone ID it just by looking at it? That's a canvasback, yes. And which is pretty incredible. I mean, this is just tule feathers and some like natural clay paint. And they think that maybe, indigenous people might have preferred to hunt diving ducks. They're a little slower off the water, unlike a wood duck, which is just a ridiculously agile flyer. But still, there's definitely this relationship here. But waterfowl have not always been hunted sustainably. As Tim said, in the early 1900s, a lot of waterfowl species were not doing so great. So Europeans came over to the Americas. They saw this unbelievable, just like so many individuals. And there was kind of this idea that there was no limit. You would never be able to hunt any of these species to extinction because there were just so many individuals. Of course, that was not the case. The first endemic bird in North America to go extinct after the Columbian Exchange was the Labrador duck, followed by the passenger pigeon and lots of other species we know about. Maybe not lots, but some. And so wood ducks were one of these species that were really heavily targeted. Oh, is that a sea lion? Okay. I was like, what is happening? It's a strange dog. Okay. Okay. So.
We told them you were coming back, and they were like,
That's awesome. Okay. So, yeah. So, and then at the same time as there was all this hunting, unregulated hunting, there was also a lot of habitat destruction happening. Urbanization and agriculture was booming really quickly. And so wood ducks were locally extinct in many areas of California by the early 1900s. And a lot of biologists wrote in like early papers that, the wood duck is soon to follow the Labrador duck into extinction. Like it was pretty clear that their fate was sealed. But there were some people that weren't hunting just to shoot as many birds as possible and then sell them. There were people that wanted to hunt sustainably and make sure that these species were preserved for their children and grandchildren. And those hunters and obviously a lot of other people got together and put through some really key legislation and management plans that kind of got us to where we are today. So we have the Lacey Act in 1900, which prevented people from hunting illegally and then going across a state line to another state where that would be legal. In 1918, the big one, the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, that put a moratorium on hunting for waterfowl species until their populations could recover. And then in 1934, you get the Migratory Bird Hunting and Conservation Stamp Act, which everybody just calls the Duck Stamp Act. And this was really key because the Duck Stamp Act provided, basically people bought duck stamps and those funds went into a federal fund that went towards habitat acquisition for the National Wildlife Refuge System. And so it's great if you stop hunting birds, but if you don't protect habitat and give them a place to actually recover in, they won't. So that was really key. 1941, wood ducks had recovered enough for the hunting season to reopen. And then in 1986, we get the North American Waterfowl Management Plan, which is a really, I would say, kind of revolutionary conservation plan. It's really based in these collaborative partnerships that they call joint ventures. And so we have one in the Central Valley, and there are these groups of federal and state agencies, nonprofits, private landowners, lots of different people that come together, create goals for certain regions, mostly around protecting habitat, and then implement those goals. And they also conduct research. So that's been a really important kind of support for waterfowl recovery. And then for wood ducks specifically, nest boxes were super crucial. So when you deforest an area and cut down all the big trees, it takes a really long time for trees to grow again large enough to have a cavity for a wood duck. You get the smaller ones for tree swallows and stuff, but wood ducks need a pretty large diameter trunk. And so in the 1930s, people started putting out nest boxes, and it was hugely successful. Wood ducks use them readily. And today, many wood duck populations still rely on nest boxes for habitat. Sometimes they're put on trees. Sometimes they're like 6-ish feet off the ground. And then some people put them like 12 feet off the ground. I think it's just to scare field technicians when they have to check them, but you never know. There's no ecological reason for that. Okay, so wood ducks in the Sacramento Valley, which is where I do all of my work currently. This is the northern half of the Central Valley. Used to be the Sacramento River floodplain. Now it's mostly rice fields. But there are some native riparian corridors left as well. And like I said before, California is a really key area for wood ducks in the Pacific population. Nesting occurs from March through July, although this year we had ducks nesting in February, and I've seen hens on boxes in September, so the season is long. And most populations, local populations, rely completely on nest boxes. We have very few like large oaks and stuff like that that would provide natural cavities. So about 3 years ago, I got involved with the UC Davis Wood Duck Project, which is a long-term monitoring project started by Dr. John Eady. They're holding a duckling and above teaching students how to measure a duckling. And he started this really as an internship program to get undergrads out in the field and holding ducks and ducklings. And then it became a long-term monitoring research project. We've had a ton of grad students work on it, as well as undergraduate field technicians and interns. We've got 7 study sites throughout the Sacramento Valley, and now over 25 years of really incredible data. And there's been a real focus on kind of wood duck demographics and social behavior throughout kind of multiple different grad student projects. So these are some of the data that I would collect in the field, or I guess that we all collect. We get sort of the nest monitoring details, the timing of nesting, number of eggs, number of ducklings hatched. And then we also capture hens on the nest and we measure them. We put USGS bands on them, which is this little metal kind of leg band that we can use to identify individuals the following year. Like I said, ducklings only spend about 24 hours in the box. So to be able to process all the ducklings, it's this sort of constant like, okay, we're going out at 6 a.m. Nope, they're not hatched. Next day, we're going out at 6 a.m. So that's a lot of work, but we try to process every brood that hatches. And then we also use pit tags, which I'll talk a little bit more about later, but they're basically these small microchips that we can inject under the skin, and it's pretty much the only way to tag ducklings except for web tags, which have maybe not the best consequences for survival. So yeah. All right. Okay. So some of the cool things that we've learned through this project, and I mean, not that the project was the first ones to discover them, but things that we found. Wood ducks have really strong site fidelity. Females, especially females, come back to the same property every year. And this bird in the middle is a hen that came back to the same box for 7 years in a row and hatched ducklings every year. She came back to this property, which has 100 nest boxes and is 3,000 acres. And the nest boxes look like that on the right. They're pairs. They're right next to each other. And yet she knew her box. She came back. And some of them aren't quite that extreme. Some of them just come back to the same area, but it's still really amazing. And this is a really unique opportunity to mark every female in the population. You don't get that very much in wildlife biology. Normally animals are really dispersed, or it's really hard to find all of them or something, or there's a lot of immigration and emigration. But for us, we have these like completely marked populations of females.
Do you bother about the males?
Well, so some people have, the issue with that is that it's a lot harder to capture them because they really never go on the nest or are around the box. They don't seem to help out a whole lot. There has been one time I've seen a drake or a male that was hanging out around the box when the ducklings were jumping, but it was unclear if he was related to them. So there have been some grad students who have captured males to try to incorporate them into the study, but it's just a lot harder to do. Okay, so wood ducks are also brood parasites, which means they lay eggs in each other's nests, which makes them super interesting for like social behavior stuff. So on the left, this is a nest with 52 eggs. Average clutch size for a single hen is 13. So there was some real cooperative breeding going on there. I shouldn't say that. Technically, it's not cooperative breeding, but okay, in the middle, you've got a hen. One of those hens is the incubating one in the box. So she's going to take care of those eggs for the full 30 days. One of them just popped in to lay an egg and is going to leave soon. I don't have the video, unfortunately, but we do have a video from inside a box of a hen coming in and laying an egg literally on the back of the other hen. Some of them are very calm. Some of them will literally fight to the death when a hen comes in to lay an egg in their box. So there's this huge range of behavior in kind of reaction to this. And then on the right, you've got a box with 23 ducklings in it. I came to process these ducklings. I came back time and time again throughout the day because I was waiting for them all to be hatched to process them. And finally, they all did at like 6 p.m. And I rushed through it to get out of there before dark. But yeah, they're... But I should say often in these clutches with a lot of eggs, a lot of them don't hatch because it's really hard for the hen to incubate them in like a stable way. Yeah. All right. So pit tags are passive integrated transponders. They are these small microchips about the size of a grain of rice. And they are the same microchips that the veterinarian puts in your dog or cat if you've ever had that done. So that means that like if your dog ever gets lost and the Humane Society finds it, they can scan its chip and then they know it belongs to you. So we basically do the same thing with ducks. Dr. Edie was the first person to use this technology in birds, previously been used in fish. So basically we inject this very small tag just under the skin and between the shoulder blades. So it would go like here-ish, in both ducklings and hens. And then that contraption on the side of the box there, it's got a solar panel, a circuit board, and a battery, connects to an antenna on the front of the box, which is the yellow circle around the duckling, and that reads the pit tag as the birds come in and out. So not only can we get when the hens are coming in and out, so like incubation behavior or maybe who's laying an egg in someone else's nest, we can also get recruitment, which is really cool. So recruitment basically means how many of those ducklings are growing up and coming back the following year as females nesting as adults in the population. And you can't band a duckling because their legs grow still from when they're a baby. And we used to use these things called web tags, which are kind of like little earrings that go in their feet. But it seems to decrease survival in some studies, possibly because they act as like a little fishing lure, possibly because it just messes with their swimming, who knows. But yeah, the pit tags do not have an effect on survival, and we can, identify these birds when they come back as adults, which is really cool. Oh, and then I forgot. So we also use genetics. I don't, but other people do. Thanks to modern genetic technology, we can take literally a drop of blood from the leg of a duckling or a hen, and people who know more about this than me can run it through machines, and then we know who that duckling is related to, both their siblings and their mother. And remember, not every duckling in the nest is going to be related to the incubating hen that we caught on the nest. So this is really interesting. It has implications for fitness and kind of total reproductive output over a female's life, etc. So very cool stuff. So I talked about this a little bit already, but I got to know the study system by working in the field and with the long-term data set. And really in my first season, I started observing eggs failing close to hatch. So this is sort of a sad picture, but on the left, that's a duckling that pipped out of the shell of the egg and then didn't make it all the way out. And then on the right, you see a hen who's incubating eggs that are very dark in color. That means they're rotten. They're not going to hatch. These females are very dedicated moms. They will sit on the nest for like 3 months, even though all their eggs are dead. And sometimes we don't see a complete nest failure, but we'll see like, 1 egg hatch out of 20 or something. So it's still having kind of this big impact. So I started getting interested in this and kind of thinking about like maybe what can we do to help them out and not have this happen as often. And I started doing some background research. Incubation temperature is really important for birds, and it can affect duckling development, how well they survive, whether or not they're able to sort of like climb up that inner wall of the nest, all these things. And nest boxes are less thermally stable than tree cavities, which basically means that when it's really hot outside, it will not be as hot inside a tree trunk compared to a wooden nest box with walls that are only like 1 inch thick. So we thought maybe heat is the issue here. And we ran a pilot study. It was led by Joe Sweeney, who was an undergrad at Davis at the time. He did this as his undergraduate thesis. And we wanted to investigate both the effects of heat and try to see if we could do something about it. So we had this paired study design where we had ventilated boxes and unventilated boxes to try to create some like cooling effects. And then we used these temperature loggers, which are really cool. They're these little metal discs here on the side of the fake eggs. You can put that egg in the nest of a duck and it will record incubation temperature. And then we had nest monitoring going on as well, so we knew what was going on inside the nest. And our preliminary results, we're working through this analysis now. First, we found that box ventilation really doesn't cool off boxes significantly, which kind of makes sense. We only drilled like 3 little holes and lifted the roof a little bit. We did that because we didn't want to disturb hens too much with a lot of light coming into the box, so it's kind of this trade-off. But we also found that boxes are reaching really high temperatures multiple times throughout a season. So this is above 40 degrees C, is above 105 degrees Fahrenheit. And eggs pretty much die above about 40.5 degrees C. So the temperatures are spiking into this like lethal zone multiple times throughout the season. And hatch success appears to decline with temperature. We found this pretty strong negative relationship between the average temperature on hatch date and the percent of eggs that hatch in the box. But we also had a pretty small sample size. So I decided that I wanted to look at this over like the whole long-term data set to try to see if I could see this trend outside of just a single year. Okay, this is the time to check in and time to stretch if you all need to. I'm gonna show you more graphs now. So I thought this would be a good moment to take. The sea lions can serenade us as we're doing that. I'm gonna get some water.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
A tree cavity, is that a natural occurrence in a tree that's like a hole in the tree?
Yes,
I'm not sure exactly.
totally. So there's basically 2 different ways that tree cavities form. Either a very large woodpecker comes in and hollows it out into kind of like a nest cavity. Yep. Or often what will happen is a big branch will break off and it will create rot inside the trunk of the tree and it will like hollow out an area. Yeah.
So it's a natural tree cavity and it's
Yeah.
deep enough for them to, because the nesting boxes are so like
Right. Yeah.
deep, so.
Yeah. It's
it's.
absolutely no. It's sort of similar. In fact, the early nest boxes were actually like basically carved out of tree trunks. And then people realized that they would just as readily nest in like a box made of plywood, which was a lot easier. But yeah, so yeah, they are naturally formed, and they still exist, like especially in the east, in these sort of older flooded forests, or like places in Illinois and stuff. There still are quite a few natural cavities for wood ducks and other species. Thank you. Yeah, and
It would be expensive, but what about, instead of ventilation, what about making the nesting boxes thicker or insulated? You know?
yeah. So people are trying a lot of other things now, especially not just for ducks, but for like seabirds and other birds that are really nesting out in the open on kind of exposed rock and stuff. They're trying making boxes out of like ceramic or other more insulated materials. They're trying making shade structures for boxes. And there does seem to be some improvement there. For us, we were really trying to target a solution that would be really easy for managers to implement, because there's sort of this trade-off between like effectiveness and is it actually going to get used. So that was our attempt. Yeah, there's definitely could be other ways to do it. Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the heat and the field technicians and what you guys went
I
through.
was going to get to that, but I can do it now. Okay. No, I can say it now. So yeah, we're working out here. I showed you a bunch of cute photos of ducklings, and they are really cute. But it's also like the working conditions are not super fun. It's extremely hot in the Central Valley. It's really humid. It's really buggy. And so like one of the reasons that we were like, maybe heat is the problem is because we would have these weeks where it would be, you know, literally like 113 is the high for like a week. And we would have to be working super early in the morning to avoid that, so we wouldn't be passing out and things. And right after that or during that is often when we'd see a lot of nest failure. So that was kind of how the idea got started, was like and also with the hens, like the females, you can't capture them when it's that hot. They'll get stressed really easily. So there's kind of a lot of considerations there. Yeah. Okay. Hard on everyone. All right, moving on. So finally to my research. Like I said, I was interested in the long-term effects of climate on wood duck breeding biology. And for right now, that's manifesting as temperature, but I'm also interested in like precipitation and potentially other climate effects. My overarching research question is, how has climate affected wood duck breeding biology in the Sacramento Valley of California over the last 25 years? So, as I said, the UC Davis Wood Duck Project has this super long-term data set, which I'm incredibly grateful for, because otherwise I would never be able to do this study as a master's student. I have over 25 years of data, but I'm using 2000 to 2024, which includes over 900 hatched nests that I can think about, like the proportion hatched or the percent of eggs that are hatching. I have local climate data for Yolo County. And then this is a map of Yolo County. Sacramento's right there on the right where that red star is. All of the sites are within the county. And you can, well, I don't know, maybe you can't see, but when I look at this map, I see a lot of little squares. And basically these sites are completely surrounded by agricultural fields or urban areas. So these are these like small pockets of habitat within a really human-dominated landscape. And yet they're supporting a pretty good number of wood ducks. We have like at that site up in the north there, Roosevelt Ranch, we get about, I don't know, like maybe 100 nests per year. So yeah. All right, so I had a couple of predictions. I thought that phenology, or the timing of nesting, might shift earlier over time in response to warmer spring temperatures. We see this in a lot of bird species in response to climate change. And if we were to see that, I would expect a negative trend where as we go forward through the years, the start of nesting is getting earlier, basically. And then for my second kind of prediction or hypothesis, I thought that wood duck hatch success would decline with higher average temperatures over incubation. And I would expect sort of this like curved relationship where at super low temperatures, eggs don't do well. And then there's like this optimum incubation temperature in the middle. And then at the other end, at super high temperatures, eggs also don't do well. I refer to them as eggs because I'm doing percent hatched, but like they're all ducklings. Okay. All right. So some preliminary results. My first prediction was not supported. Initiation dates are not changing at all. That is a completely flat line, or at least the average start of initiation pretty much staying the same for the last, I guess that's 24 years on that graph. So why could this be? Potentially, the reason is that temperatures in June and July in Yolo County are significantly increasing. It is getting hotter in the summer, we have more extreme heat events, etc. But average temperatures in February and March really aren't changing that much. And so maybe there's sort of this disconnect where in the early season, females don't have a good cue to predict those later season temperatures. And I've told you already that they incubate their eggs for 30 days. So if you start in, I don't know, end of April, and it's like 70 degrees outside, your nest is gonna hatch at the beginning of June when it might be 95. So there's this really big jump in temperature, and it might be hard for females to track or predict that. But we do see that the proportion of eggs that hatch declines with higher average temperatures over incubation. So we don't get any of those cold temperatures on the left side of this prediction graph. They do in the east. Eggs literally freeze there. But for us, that's not the problem. So we sort of see that there's this like optimum temperature, and then it sort of decreases from there non-linearly. And again, this is county level weather data, right? So this is not me measuring temperatures inside a box. So there might be some confounding factors here for sure. But I think at least what my master's advisor and I have kind of come to is that like, it would be really easy not to find a trend here, but it would be pretty hard to create the trend. So we're currently assuming that this is a pretty good proxy for like what the actual box temperature is. And I also want to say that this graph is the result of many hours of tears over statistical modeling. And so it includes, like, it controls for different clutch sizes, different hen age and mass, different site like characteristics. So there's a lot of things in here, not just temperature, that's suggesting that temperature really is the thing that is having the effect. So that seems to tell a really clear story, but then we graph it by site. And some sites have a very different relationship with temperature than others. So this one here is Roosevelt Ranch, and temperature just has this massive effect on hatch success at that site compared to all the others, which is kind of good because it means that, like, potentially there are ways to buffer boxes or place them in a way that where temperature isn't having these effects. But it also means that we need to do further investigation, which is what I'm working on now. Okay, so my next steps. I need to work on figuring out the differences between sites. I think probably it's habitat type. Some of our sites, like Roosevelt Ranch, are these very open marsh areas, few scattered willow trees. They don't have water on them all summer, etc. And then we have other sites like the one on the right, which is Russell Ranch, just this closed riparian corridor, super shady, lots of oaks, high humidity from that perennial water source. So yeah, I'm working on creating vegetation indices for all these sites at each box to try to see if that is what's changing the effect of landscape level temperature. And then, as I mentioned, I'd also really love to develop some management recommendations for box placement. One of the amazing things about nest boxes is that literally anyone can put one out. You can put a nest box in your backyard. The slight downside of that is that sometimes people put them in places that might not be super good for the birds that are nesting in them. And so I think kind of specifically for wood ducks, specifically in this area, coming up with some ideas about how we could buffer them from extreme heat while they're nesting would be really awesome. I am also someone who believes that research too often gets lost in like scientific journals that nobody reads. So I'm hoping I can write this up in a slightly more accessible way and maybe work with some local nonprofits like California Waterfowl Association to distribute it. And then I'm also, like I mentioned, I'm interested in how temperature and precipitation affects recruitment. So that survival over the winter and then coming back the next year. Haven't gotten there yet though. Okay, so we're gonna zoom out for the last part of the talk to waterfowl generally and kind of the future of bird conservation, which I'm super not qualified to talk about, but I'm going to share a few things with you anyway. This is the State of the Birds report from 2022. This is the opening graph and quote. They say, birds across the US show downward trends in every habitat except wetlands, where comebacks of waterfowl show the power of funding and policy investments. And I already knew that waterfowl conservation was kind of different from other conservation in some ways, but this really struck me as like, waterfowl could be a really great model for how we might try to conserve other species. These collaborative partnerships, these kind of locally focused organizations like joint ventures, working with private landowners, etc. I also would like to say that this is since 1970, right? So some of this giant shoot up of ducks and geese is because they were hunted to near extinction and are now recovering super fast. But still, they're doing well. So California's Central Valley supports 60% of all wintering migratory waterfowl in the Pacific Flyway. If you haven't been there in the winter, like now, you need to go. It is phenomenal. It's like being in a National Geographic documentary. You have hundreds of thousands of birds in the air. It's ridiculous. Currently, there's 7 million ducks and geese that winter there, but there used to be 20 to 40 million. So that's a pretty big reduction. We also have lost a huge amount of our wetlands. We used to have 5 million acres of wetlands. Now we have about 250,000. There's also about 500,000 acres of rice, which these fields get flooded in the winter and ducks eat the remaining grain and kind of the rice straw and so on, which is good for the farmers as well because it helps to rot the rice straw. But rice is awesome as surrogate habitat, but it also doesn't have the same kind of habitat value as a traditional wetland because birds can't breed there. And also rice is kind of low in nutritional value. It's basically just carbs. So not so great. Yeah. So in the Sacramento Valley specifically, where I work, we've got about 79,000 acres of habitat. Again, that sounds like a lot, but we used to have 1.5 million. So big reduction. And almost half of this is protected in national wildlife refuges. The other half is private land, or I guess over half. And these are mostly managed duck clubs. They tend to be really well funded and well managed. But there's also kind of, I think, some upside specifically to national wildlife refuges. One of them is that they're protected in perpetuity. For private land, unless you have it in a trust, it could very easily get modified into something else. And also, wildlife refuges are open to public recreation, which allows birders and hunters and other interested people to go and sort of have this connection with waterfowl and other species that are coming through the valley. So back to the Duck Stamp Act. This act is just really incredible. Every hunter in the United States who hunts waterfowl has to buy a duck stamp every year, and 98% of that revenue goes directly to acquiring and managing habitat in the National Wildlife Refuge system. Since 1934, $1.1 billion have been raised, which is even more impressive when you think about the original duck stamp was only $1. And 6 million acres of habitat have been protected. And this includes wetlands and grasslands and a lot of areas that support a lot of other species besides waterfowl. Oh, sorry. And that pintail down there is our current 2024 duck stamp. All right.
For $25.
Now it's $25. Yes, it's gone up. Okay. So thinking about sort of the future of this method of funding habitat, waterfowl hunters are declining in the United States, the number of them. And there are a lot of programs to try to reverse that. And it's possible we will. But I think with increasing urbanization and kind of the general social climate, it's possible that it won't happen quickly. And so we need to sort of think about, like, if there's less duck stamp sales from hunters, who's going to buy them? And the good news is anyone can. So they're only $25 a year, and they provide habitat, like I said, for so many other species in addition to waterfowl. Like, if you've ever been to Gray Lodge or Sacramento National Wildlife Refuge, there's just, the biodiversity is incredible. Also, a current duck stamp is a free pass to any of the wildlife refuges. So more incentive there. Yeah, so you can buy them online. You can actually get them at some post offices, but I don't know if you can get them at our post office. Yeah.
They usually send them back in January, end of January. So you have to do it before the hunting season ends, because the reason they have them is because the hunter has to have them.
Exactly. So they come out like June, I think June 30th usually. And then you can buy them either online or from your local post office. And it's like literally like a stamp, which is kind of cool. Anyway, and people collect these. Yes. Sorry?
Where do you apply it? So if I bought one, where would I apply it so I can show it to a wildlife refuge?
I think that's up to you. I don't think. Where do you put the duck stamp to show it to people? You just have it. Yeah.
You're supposed to have a signature on it.
Yeah.
Either for hunting or to show that you're using it and not giving it to someone else.
Yeah.
It's not like a sticker on your car.
No, it isn't. Yeah, no. And there's this big, one of the other cool things about them, obviously they're very beautiful. And every year there's this big art competition where lots of people submit paintings. And I wanted to highlight this one on the bottom. This is the junior duck stamp from 2020-2021. And it was painted by a 13-year-old from South Dakota named Madison Grimm. And I think it's a beautiful wood duck. Anyway. All right. More pictures. They're gorgeous. You should collect them. Start now. Well, not now. Next year. All right.
How big are they? Are they little?
They're like a
little card?
It's like a stamp. You can also get like other iterations of it. Like you can get full prints and stuff of them as like collector's editions. It's a whole thing.
It's a little tiny.
Go ahead,
It comes
Doug.
attached to like a 5 by 3 inch
Yeah.
Okay,
card.
okay.
Originally, it was a stick that you would affix to your hunting license.
Right.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, that's my spiel on duck stamps. Moving back to wood ducks just to sort of close this out. So, like I said, I think waterfowl and wood ducks are a really interesting model of how we can do conservation in a super collaborative way. Wood ducks are a true conservation success story. Collaboration among a lot of different stakeholders is the reason that we still have wood ducks today. Creating these sort of habitat patches within working landscapes allows wood ducks to persist even in areas that are pretty much completely dominated by agriculture and other human-related activities. And we still need to keep conducting research to inform management and, you know, especially as we're kind of moving forward into these times of climate change and continued habitat destruction and other sort of novel stressors that these birds might be facing, it's really important to make sure that we're practicing what they call adaptive management and adjusting our management solutions as we go forward. All right. Thank you so much for listening. Wait. Okay. Thank you to the Mendocino Audubon Society for hosting me, to everyone who has worked on the project and the landowners I work with. Also wanted, again, to say thank you to everyone in this room who has been a mentor of mine throughout the years, and also to my mom, who has heard this talk twice in the last 2 days and yet still showed up. It's incredible. All right, any questions?
I also interviewed Tenaya, and it'll be aired tomorrow at 7 o'clock on KZYX if you want to hear more. At KZYX, yeah. Wow.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ecology hour.
Well, it seems like the nesting behavior of wood ducks makes this kind of research, if not easy, possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
How can you transfer it to other kinds of ducks? You're gonna have to start tromping through the swamps looking for
Yeah.
nests.
No, that's a great question. So the question is sort of like, how do we transfer this research to ducks that don't conveniently nest in boxes where we can find them? And there are a lot of people working on this. So well, I guess I should say there's a couple different things. First, there's a bunch of Arctic nesting species, which are nesting on super open tundra. So that's also a place you can do this. And then for grassland species, people do go out and search for nests and successfully find them. So it is possible. It's harder. But yeah, we're definitely lucky in our system, but it's possible to do in other systems. I actually just came home from a conference on birds, and there was a fellow grad student there who was researching very similar things in eiders up in Canada. So yeah, it can be done.
Good luck.
Thanks. Yeah.
I'm wondering about the wood ducks here, what you know about that. I used to go to McCarricker and go around the lake, and I would see them there in the boxes, but now I can't even, I don't know if anybody can go there if there's any left. Do you know anything about that?
I think that would be a great question for Tim. I have not birded around this area for a little while, unfortunately, so I wouldn't know really how they're doing specifically on the coast.
There's,
Yeah.
you know, those, I don't know that anybody is maintaining those boxes that were put up a long time ago, but I think the wood ducks are still using them because there are still wood ducks on Lake Leon. In fact, this year there were quite a lot of them.
Oh, okay.
They're hard to see. They tend to hang out on the far eastern edge, and there's no access over there anymore with the Fort Bragg.
How do you know they're there? You go out on a boat?
Scope.
Yeah.
Okay.
Spotting scope and scope, and you can see them pretty clearly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Hey,
Yeah.
Tenaya.
Hi.
How do the wood ducks clean out their nest? Or do they? I mean, year to year? Like,
Yeah.
Good question.
That is a great question, Karen. So how do wood ducks clean out their nests year to year? At our sites, we do it for them. So yeah, sometimes you'll get a nest that's like pretty clean after they hatch. It's just eggshells and down. But especially in these nests that fail, like it's pretty gross. So we go and clean them out. However, it's mostly for our benefit checking the nest because they will re-nest on top of like pretty much anything. They'll take over from ash-throated flycatchers in the boxes. They'll nest in old barn owl boxes that are also super gross. So yeah, it's more for our benefit that when we check it, it's more, yeah.
When you put a new box out, do you line it with anything or just?
Yeah, we put some wood shavings in the bottom so that the eggs don't crack when they hit the bottom of the box. In a natural tree cavity, you might expect some like detritus and leaves and stuff. But yeah, so we do that. Yeah.
So in bufflehead and goldeneye, they're nested boxes.
Mm-hmm.
Often they're laid eggs in their sisters' nests and so on. So
Yeah.
are your wood ducks, are you able to track the particular wood duck, and are they going to other nests, or are there just parasites that are coming to their nests?
Yeah, so I guess I didn't explain that fully before, but we definitely have some birds in the population that only incubate, and then we have some birds that only lay eggs in each other's nests or in other birds' nests, and then we have some that do both. And from the genetics, we think that birds that are related are more likely to parasitize each other, or birds with like social kind of like social rapport, like who nest near each other, etc.
That's a good strategy.
Exactly.
It's not parasitism, it's
Yeah.
the risk of it.
But we actually have a new grad student, Mary Badger, in the lab who's working on that now and looking at the last like 10 years of genetics data to try to figure all that out, because it's the amount of data you get from the RFID readers and the genetics is just mind-blowing. It's so many rows in Excel sheets. So yeah, it takes a lot of work to figure all that out, but seems like it.
When a duck lays her eggs in somebody else's nest, does she go back to her own box and pretend that she didn't?
Yeah, they don't usually look very suspicious when I see them. I don't know. Maybe they're good at pretending. No, but yeah, as I said, so some of them will go back to the box that they're incubating, but then other birds, we think maybe more like young birds that don't have a lot of resources, actually only lay eggs in the nest of other birds, so that they don't have a nest that they're incubating. They'll, I don't know, go back to whatever they're doing in their day. Yeah. But mostly they'll go back and incubate, and like I said, they're pretty dedicated. They stay on the nest almost all day, but there are sort of these incubation breaks in like the morning and the afternoon, and that's seems to be usually when the parasites come in and lay their egg in that
And
nest.
that's not just wood ducks, right? It's number of
Yeah,
number of
yeah.
water.
Most ducks. Yeah, I should mention actually, brood parasitism is like really common in waterfowl. Weirdly, I didn't know this, but canvasbacks and redheads will parasitize each other. We have hooded mergansers that sometimes nest in these boxes. Wood ducks will lay eggs in their nests. Yeah, it's very widespread. And buffleheads and golden eyes, like Doug said. Yeah. Lori, go ahead.
What is like the lifespan of a healthy wood duck?
It's a great question. The average lifespan for our ducks is about 3 years, but we have had a 9-year-old duck that came back this year. So
3 years?
Yeah.
What is that? I mean, I'm trying to think. They look so cute when they're little, and then, I mean, they
Like what
still look
happens to them?
good.
Or like,
Is it prey or aging or?
Yeah, so one of the sort of sad things to think about ducklings is that most of them actually don't make it through their first year. The survival, well, really like the first 2 weeks. There's sort of this gauntlet where they're small enough to be popcorn for pretty much anything. Like you've got herons eating them, you've got fish eating them, you've got turtles eating them. So once they make it through that time period and they kind of get a little bigger, they still have predators, great horned owls and other raptors and so on. Some of our females get killed in the nest by like mammalian predators like mink or otter. So yeah, I think normally that sort of 3-year cutoff is likely due to predation, but we don't really know. Yeah.
Is there a specific size hole that the box should have in it for the nesting? Is that important or not? The hole diameter?
Yeah, I think it's important in the sense that it kind of provides some protection to have an opening that is just big enough for the female to fit through, right? If it's super large, anything could walk in there and grab eggs. So yeah, if you look it up online, there's some recommendations. I think they're trying to think right now in my head about like how big they are. I'd say they're maybe like 4 by 6, something like that. They're pretty small. The ducks are pretty small. Like they're about 1/3 the size of a mallard. So they're pretty small duck. Yeah.
So you mentioned the placement of the box might be
Yeah.
important. So is that information online too, or just how to build a box? Or, because that would be something important for people that wanted to put out a box. Maybe give them an idea how to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be a great thing to include. I know that there is placement recommendations in the sense of like, this is where wood ducks like to exist. Like you should put them in a riparian habitat or along a stream or whatever. I think what I'm thinking of more specifically is like microhabitat characteristics. So like, do you place them under the tree or away from the tree? Things like that, which might create some more kind of buffering from heat and direct sun. But yeah,
What about artificial shade canopies? Would that be reasonable? Or?
Yeah, I think it could be. I think one of the issues we run into here, right, is that these are private landowners. Many of them are pretty rich, but there is sort of a limit on what people are willing to do. And if that's really proven to work, awesome. But if it's kind of like, oh yeah, put out a shade canopy, it might work. We're not really sure yet. Then there's kind of not that that push to implement that. So I think that would probably be another study that we need to do to see if that works. Yeah.
So do you have a sense? Does pretty much all groups have a passion for conservation, or do you encounter areas where you think maybe some people don't care about the conservation? Or?
Yeah, I would say like the majority of people in Davis don't know that these ducks exist near them. And I don't mean that in like a mean way. I don't think they're against the conservation of ducks. I think they're just not aware. And so like the people that, you know, farmers and duck club owners and so on tend to be pretty pro conservation. In fact, a lot of farmers like put out like block off small sections of their land to keep riparian habitat and make space for waterfowl. But yeah, I would say more in sort of urban areas, there's just less awareness about it, I guess. Yeah.
Great talk tonight.
Thanks so much.
Real. I think the part that you brought up about the duck stamp and conservation as a model I think that's really inspiring, and I'm really glad that you spoke so well, spoke nicely to that, because you can think about it in like what if fishing had the same kind of, you know, like if the full involvement of our fishing community to try to save some of our fish, buy a license that helps conserve conservation. I mean, the fishing license does to some extent.
Yeah,
but
there
it
is some
isn't
of
as
that.
clear a conversation, or maybe lacking some of that. Anyway, I just really appreciate how you presented that, and that it is inspirational for conservation efforts.
Thanks so much. I appreciate that.
I was thinking about the duck boxes. They're already something that is man-made. So maybe without a shade cloth, but some ingenious way of adding something kind of simple that does keep those boxes cooler.
Yeah.
Because it's already man-made. What little tweak?
Absolutely.
Really great talk today.
Thanks. Yeah, I think both of those are great points. We do have the Pittman-Robertson Act, which does funnel the sale of fishing licenses and guns and ammo and so on into other conservation funds, but it's true that it's not quite the same link, and there isn't quite the same involvement in like the art contest and like the collector's aspect of it and all those things, right? Yeah, and then with modifying boxes, like I think that's a really great point, and I think that's another thing that I sort of hope comes out of what I'm doing, is that previous to this, we didn't really have any proof that heat was affecting wood ducks. And so now that we know that, maybe that will kind of motivate people to think about those types of solutions. Yeah.
Is there anybody in your group who has an interest in trying, you know, a prototype of this and putting out tin boxes that have just tin over the top with an airspace, or, you know, all those kinds of things that are possibilities to make it simple and not have a canopy involved? Would there be somebody who's doing a study on that?
Yeah, so my major professor just retired, so our lab is not going to be continuing to do that, unfortunately. However, there are, like I mentioned, California Waterfowl Association has a big statewide wood duck program as well. Ducks Unlimited has some great conservation programs. So I think there are definitely other people who could work on that. And then at Davis, there's a new waterfowl professor who will likely be starting to work on a lot of this. So yeah, hopefully not in my lab specifically.
Yeah. Cool.
Is there something about wood ducks in their behavior that you said they were almost hunted to extinction? Are they slow flyers? Do they not scare easily? Do they taste better than another duck? I mean, what quality made them susceptible?
Yeah, so actually sort of much the opposite. They're extremely agile flyers. They're pretty difficult to hunt because they don't like come out in the open like a lot of other ducks and in these massive flocks. Although I was talking to Doug and he tells me that they're roosting by the thousands in Chesapeake Bay, but not where we are. So yeah, I think mainly it was the pretty intense hunting pressure, and then that coupled with habitat loss. So if you're, one of the things we think about a lot is that like a lot of species can deal with like one stressor, like hunting pressure, but then as soon as you sort of start adding on, there's this additive effect, and they're often not able to continue. So I don't know, maybe someone has a better answer than that. I don't think there's anything specific about wood ducks, maybe because they're really pretty and a lot of people also taxidermy them and so on. But yeah, generally just everybody was killing a lot of birds.
Habitat is accessible, so they're like a lot of puddle ducks.
That's true.
They're called. They're a kind of puddle duck because they tend to be in small waterways that you can get to, and when you walk up to a waterway where they are, they jump up off the water and fly.
Yeah,
so
that is a great point. Yeah.
And then they don't go very far because they're not a real long distance flyer, so they'll fly to the next puddle or waterway and land, and if there's enough hunters, they just get shot out there too. So when there's got to be a lot of hunting pressure, it really hits birds like that harder than long distance flight type waterfowl. It could just, you know, when there's a flock of 1,000 ducks and they get up, green field or something, and they'll fly like rockets, but they might go 50 miles before they settle back down. And these guys won't do.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I didn't think about that, but yeah, it's a lot easier to hunt, like, or at least to access a riparian area than like a big marsh.
But,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
they are challenging. You're exactly right. They are like little rockets.
Yeah.
They fly like quail. They just get off the water and explode.
I'll ask you a question that everybody here knows except you. Is it just the males that have the color, the distinct colors? Or, he showed us that one.
You had a great one.
All right, let me go back here for just a moment. So I did put a lot of photos of males in this presentation, and that's sort of funny because I don't even really work on them, right? But just because they're really pretty. Let's see if I can get to it. But yeah, so hens have this, can't see it super well. There we go. Hens have this coloration, iridescence throughout their back, and then this is her wing. So she's got like this blue and white through her primaries, and they have a really iridescent speculum as well, which most other female ducks, most other female ducks do have some color, but not to this extent. And then actually, I wish I'd put a photo in. When they get older, some of them will almost like start to look like males. So they'll keep that white eye patch, but they'll start developing like the red star pattern on their chest, or they'll get a red eye ring, or they'll start developing like little white chin straps. So yeah, it kind of depends. The younger birds tend to be less colorful for sure, the females and the males actually. Young males are like, they look like they're trying, but they're not quite there yet. And then they just get prettier as they age. So yeah. Yeah.
That's a great photo of the iridescent.
When you catch the females, you just lift the lid off the box and reach in and grab one? Or how do you-
Yeah, there's a whole method. So some of them you can walk up and you can open the lid and they'll just sit there and look at you. And you're like, okay, cool. And you reach in and you grab them and they're like, all right, I guess this is happening. But a lot of them are not that calm. A lot of them will try to kind of jump and fly out if they see any light. My favorite method is to put like a big jacket over the box and then I just reach in blind and kind of feel around and grab them. That's my preferred method. But like, when my major professor, Dr. John Eady, taught me how to catch one of these ducks, he walked up to the box and he was like, all right, you go like this. You just grab it. Here it is. And I was like, what? I was like, what do you mean? So it really depends on how long you've been doing it. Like, yeah. Yeah. All right. Are we good? Cool. Thank you so much.